This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Hello and welcome to Voices Unhindered. I'm Crystal Jenkinson. On this show, I give a unique perspective and listening ear to voices that often go unheard. I want everyone to know that you are not alone and that your voice and story matters. On this week's episode of Voices Unhindered, I chat with former owner of Maison de Crepes, Sheena Hemens. Sheena grew up in London to Sri-Lankan parents that immigrated and shares her memories of reading and writing as an escape to her everyday reality. Sheena goes on to share how she has begun healing from her daughter Lauren's death in 2023, the close of Maison de Crepes, and opens up about being true to herself. Hello, Sheena.
Hi, Crystal. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you today?
I am good. I didn't get a good night's sleep last night, so I'm drinking coffee and hoping that will have a good effect on me.
How is it? Is it helping?
Yes, it's good. It's going down well. Black Betty's do great coffee.
Are you addicted to coffee? Or
No, I only have one a day, and I don't have
good.
one every day.
Oh, that's
I really
great.
try not to.
There's definitely the risk of addiction, with coffee.
Oh, look, without a doubt. And I know people who have 5 or 6 coffees a day. I don't know how they sleep. Mm-hmm. So, no, not me.
So, you're such an interesting person. Could you please share?
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you are. Like when I met you, I was like, you're friendly and warm and easy to talk to. Like you're very relaxed.
Thank you.
So could you please share about your background, like where you grew up, your ethnicity, and just
Sure. It's been something that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, but the basic story is that I was born in London to immigrant parents from Sri Lanka.
Why did they go to London? Do you mind?
It's a good question. I think the easy answer is for a better life. But my mother came from a wealthy family, my dad from not such a wealthy family. And I don't know too much because they're a little bit coy about telling us this whole sort of story. But I think that it wasn't encouraged for them to get married because she came from a higher class family and he didn't. So I think that may have been one of the reasons that they came to London to kind of get away from all of that.
Yeah.
But I imagine life must have been really hard for them actually arriving in England and London in 1956. Trying to think, this last couple of years I've been thinking a bit more about it and asking, what was it like for them? Because my mother would have been wearing a sari. My dad was quite westernized and always wore a suit and that sort of thing. But, England was really racist.
Was he educated? Do you mind me asking?
Yeah. I haven't got loads of answers about my parents because my dad died when I was 17. So I never really got the chance to talk to him about things. And my mum was a little bit kind of vague. I don't know quite why. So we got I've got a younger brother and we had quite mixed stories about their story, if that makes sense. Yeah, just from my own research, I suppose, looking at how England would have been when they arrived, it would have been a very racist place. And I can't imagine that it was particularly easy for them. And I know that my mum did wear a sari for the first few years and then probably gave it up for Western clothes. I never really saw her in a sari or anything like that unless it was a very special occasion. And I mean like a wedding anniversary or something like that. So I think they tried their best to integrate and be a part of the British community as opposed to some cultures who I know can become very in their own little cliques.
Yes.
Yeah, they weren't like that. And apparently I've heard since then that Sri Lankans are generally not like that. So Indian people tend to be, to live in very family-orientated communities. And I don't know about here, but certainly in London or in the UK, you can get a whole, number of generations of a family living on the same street. Mm-hmm. And often the parents don't speak English. They might have lived in England for 20, 30, 40 years, but they still don't speak English because they don't have to, because they live in a community.
Yeah.
And then their children translate for them. From what I understand, and I'm totally happy to be corrected, but I don't think that Sri Lankans in general do that. So my parents were very we didn't actually know many other Sri Lankan people.
Yeah.
So, it was interesting because growing up, kind of not realizing that you were Sri Lankan that sounds ridiculous, knowing, what I look like, and I look in the mirror and I see a brown face, but I didn't, I felt really white. It sounds odd, but I did. I felt, all my friends were white, all my parents' friends were, and so...
And you act like very British.
No, but I am. I can't... If I'm not British, then I actually don't know what I am, because I'm certainly not Sri Lankan. So, that's my heritage, yes. I realised that when I came to New Zealand, that I am very British. And... even though I've been here, so I'm rushing ahead, you may have questions about this, but I'm going to say that I've been in New Zealand for 29 years, and yet I still feel very British.
Yes, and your accent is very straight from Britain. It hasn't changed. And I know my granddad, he came from London, and he'd been here since he was a teenager, and you could still hear it slightly, but because he had a real strong Cockney accent, because he came from he grew up in those, social housing blocks that all look the same, because he was quite poor growing up. Yeah. And he came here for a better life, and came on one of those ships that took 6 weeks back.
Oh, my gosh. That would have been
on
tough.
his own. And he was only a young lad. So, what was I saying? I forgot what I was saying.
No, about his accent.
Yes, he still had it, but it was very hard for him to lose it completely.
Well, I think if you move countries as an adult, you tend to keep the accent that you had, and it can soften. I think mine has a little bit. It depends on who I'm talking to. I mean, it's funny that you should say that about your dad coming on a ship. So my mum came on a ship from Sri Lanka to England in 1955, 1956 or something. And I've thought about that quite a lot recently, about just, my gosh, what a journey that would have been. It would have taken weeks and weeks, and it would have been quite, she had a chaperone, and was, it must have been incredibly scary.
Such a big risk, eh?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's scary enough coming, as we did, getting on a plane and coming to Christchurch. But yeah, I think to be on a long voyage like that, and I've no idea what happened on that trip. She doesn't really talk about it, but I've been really curious, and I think I might end up writing a novel about it one day, because I find it really fascinating.
Was it her and your dad together?
No, they met in England.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, but they both kind of came for the same reasons, I think. But
what kind of ship was it? You don't know?
I have no idea.
Because I'm
I know. I have so many questions.
A cruise line?
Yeah. Well, I think it must have been a cruise ship. It wasn't. She was from a good family, so I'm sure she wasn't, slumming it in a trade ship or something like that. So I'm sure it was, a cruise ship or something. And I wouldn't mind actually doing some research to see, if I could find a passenger manifest with her name on it, or whatever. But yeah, I'm quite intrigued now. And it seems really odd to be in my 50s and to only now be questioning my background. I guess I'd just been so busy living and, having family and getting through life that I hadn't really thought about it too much. But now, for various reasons, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I have been thinking about it and find there's more questions than answers. Like
your parent coming and taking a risk to go to Britain. Do you think that kind of planted in you risk taking when you were quite entrepreneurial? I wouldn't say that I was when I was younger. I think that developed as I got older and after my divorce. So when I was on my own, I realised that yes, I had this kind of slightly risk-taker attitude and definitely a more of an entrepreneurial attitude to life. And I was hungry for learning and for information. So I used to read loads of books about
being an entrepreneur and listen to lots of podcasts from people who were, and just try to kind of absorb that energy. Yeah. And then I guess when I saw an opportunity, I went for it. But it hasn't all worked out. But that is, what happens when you're an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
Some things work and some things don't. But when I was younger, I was very, very different. So when I was a young child and a teenager, I was impossibly shy.
You?
Me. I know. I was absolutely could not look at anyone, could not talk to anyone. And, the phrase that they would use in the UK is I couldn't say boo to a goose. I don't know where that comes from but I was really shy and was, just had no confidence and didn't have a lot of friends and was just, my teenage years were totally different to the person that I developed into, if that makes sense.
What do you think changed since your teen years to now? Like, was it a life-changing experience?
Well, it's interesting you should say that. I wouldn't say that there was one particular life-changing experience, but I think that I did get a lot of racism when I was young as a teen at school. I was the only person of colour in the whole of my school of 600 children until my brother started, a few years later. And I got really badly bullied. And so I guess maybe subconsciously my strategy was to be invisible, just to hide and try not to be noticed. And so I just went into myself, and I was a voracious reader, and I basically lived in books for the whole of my teens, and old movies. So I kind of hid in books at school, and I studied a lot. I was that weird kid that asked for extra work
oh my gosh.
in the holidays. Because I didn't have anything else to do, because I really didn't have friends. I mean, it feels like a different person to who I am now. Mm-hmm. But back then I was very introverted, and I just, I read and I studied and I wrote and I did a lot of things that I then kind of lost as I grew up until recently.
Recently, like, how did it come back? Like, your passion for writing and reading, obviously, when did it?
I guess I have to talk about what happened in 2023 in June. My daughter was hit by a car and was killed up in Auckland, and that was it's an understatement to say that was incredibly hard. So that was the biggest life-changing experience I think I've really ever had, and it's taken me over 18 months to be able to to talk about it in this kind of situation. I've wanted to because I've searched out a lot of people who've had similar experiences and listened to podcasts and read blogs and read books, and they've helped me, but I just wasn't ready to be able to talk about it. I didn't even, I've got, a fairly big Facebook profile and LinkedIn and all of those sorts of things. And I mean, at the beginning I did tell people what had happened, but then after that I haven't really put it out there and, into the world. I've been very private. I've just been dealing with it myself. But that made me become, as I say, more introverted. And as a result of that, some things happened. I started to ask myself, ask myself what makes me happy and what fills my cup with joy. Because when something like this happens and someone young, she was only 27, she was just starting out in her amazing career that she was going to have, and she'd had a fantastic partner, and they had just signed a lease that week. The week that it happened, they just signed a lease on a beautiful apartment to move in together. Life was just starting to happen, and then it was just snuffed out. And it made me just think, God, life is so short. You don't know when your moment is up, when your life is going to end. And sorry, I don't mean that to sound
no, it's true,
pessimistic, because I'm actually an incredibly optimistic person. Yes. But it made me just realize for the first time in my life that how fragile our lives are, and that we just kind of go through the motions and do these things that we don't love and that we don't enjoy, and we call that living. And I'd been doing the same, so I'm not criticizing or judging anyone else who might be doing that, but I just in that time I just thought to myself, I need to live my life, not just for me, but for her as well now. And I need to do things that are meaningful, that bring me joy, and I don't want to waste my time with things that just going through the motions. So that was this, and it was this big moment, I suppose, that took a long time to kind of come out, because I had to work it out in my own head amongst all the grief. But I asked myself, what are the things that I love to do? And it involved going back to when I was a teenager and going back to the fact that I loved reading. And I don't mean I have always read, but over the last 10, 15 years, I've read business books and marketing and books on business and I don't know, boring kind of.
Do you have any qualifications? Like, do you mind me?
No, not really.
Like self-taught?
Yeah.
That's
yes.
so cool.
I mean, I did a marketing course when I was in England when I was young, and some business stuff, and I've done sales courses, but I didn't go and get a degree or do anything like that. So everything that I learnt, I have created for myself, I suppose, through work and experience. But I loved reading fiction. And I realised I hadn't really, apart from when I was on holiday, which I didn't take many holidays when I had my own businesses, I had stopped reading. And I thought, why? Because I get such a joy from it. So I started reading it, and I was reading like 2 books a week. And that then led into writing, which was something else that I loved when I was young. And I used to write stories all the time and illustrate them and do all that sort of thing. Counsellor actually, who said to me, why don't you try to deal with your emotions and the way that you feel through writing? Yeah. And it was really, really therapeutic, and I haven't stopped.
And what was your writing like when you were a teenager? Like, did you get like real good grades for like, not that like it matters, like, because you could be great.
I did. I mean, I got A's in all my kind of English and English literature and all that sort of thing. It was something that I loved, and I worked hard at it, and I studied, and it seemed to come quite naturally to me, which is why when I was reflecting on all of this after Lauren passed, I was like, why did I ever stop?
Yeah.
Why did I stop doing these things that I loved? And I think so many of us do. We get so embroiled in the day-to-day kind of workings of life, whether that's parenthood or work or business or whatever it is, your routine. Maybe you get up and go to the gym and then go to work and then come home and make your dinner and
like
watch
you do
TV.
Stuff, but you don't like create. Like...
Yeah, and you don't ask yourself, what do these things bring me joy, and what meaning am I getting out of it? Is there anything meaningful about my life? And I actually had to sort of say no. Yeah, I mean, it was a very tough time, and other things happened. The person I was in a relationship with couldn't cope with me and my grief, and we broke up, and I had to move out 3 weeks after Lauren died, which was horrific. And I had a lot of anger about that. Yeah. So that was kind of one of the things where I wrote a short story about it.
You wanted like more support, but you weren't kind of getting it from...
Oh, absolutely.
Or understanding.
I felt really let down and really betrayed. But there was no point saying anything to him, because he wouldn't... people don't change, Ladies out there, people, especially men, they don't change. So I thought there's no point I'm going to say, to say all this stuff to him. So I actually created a couple of characters, and I wrote a short story, and I got the character that sort of represented me to say all the stuff that I had pent up inside of me, all the anger, all of the frustration, all of the betrayal and the loss and the everything. I got her to say it to him in the story, and it was great, because you can just be free to say what you want when you're writing your own story.
Yeah.
And I was able to say things to him, the character, which represented the guy that I couldn't say.
The guy.
So yeah, it was really cathartic, and I really recommend it, even if you're not a writer. If you've got things that are bothering you, to put it into a story, even if it sounds like, Jack and Jill, or it sounds childlike, it doesn't matter, because actually it really allows you to say whatever you want to say in a safe way, because it's not you.
You're like kind of putting yourself outside the story, but like you're still
absolutely
kind of connecting with the characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a subtle way of like... It's kind of like writing a song about someone, eh? It's kind of similar. Like you're not saying
the Taylor
it to them,
Swift
but
effect,
but you're kind of saying it with her.
You write about your exes and get it all out of your system. And I can't sing, and I wouldn't know how to write a song, but I knew how to write a story. And I'm not saying that it was very good, but I ended up writing a few different short stories, and then last year I ended up actually writing a novel. So, I'll say I wrote the first draft of a novel, and it was pretty terrible, but I'm now doing the second draft and fine-tuning it and, changing it.
Oh, wow.
And I loved the process.
Wow. I just wish I had, I'm quite articulative as well. And during school, I loved writing and stuff. But I don't know if I'd have the patience to continue with writing. And then I feel like I put stuff down and then I want to go back, but then I don't get a chance. And all that stuff.
It's like they say about having a yoga practice, which I've never managed to do. You have to have a writing practice. And I think, so after Lauren and after the breakup and all of that, and also the other thing that happened in 2023, which was the worst year of my life, was that my restaurant closed. So I had a lot going on that year. All at once. And honestly, it was too much, and I had a real breakdown. So I'm not too proud to say it, and I hope that by saying it, maybe there's somebody who might listen to this and go, oh, it's not just me, because I just couldn't cope. My brain just could not cope with all of the stuff that was going on. My body couldn't cope with everything that had happened, and the pain that I felt and the upset, and I just had to kind of switch out of life for a bit. And so I didn't work. I just took care of myself. I focused on trying to go for a walk every day, which I didn't always do because I just didn't feel like it and couldn't get out of bed. But, I tried to eat well. I tried to catch up with the people who mattered to me and to whom I mattered. And I didn't spend a lot of time with those people that I'd probably spent quite a lot of time with in the previous years, because I realized that they were kind of drinking friends, drinking buddies, going out friends. And
there for the good times, but not the hard times.
Yeah. And grief is a weird thing. People are really scared of grief in this culture anyway. In our Western culture, it's people are really frightened. They don't know what to say. And I'm not like that. Just my personality is not like that. If I know that someone is going through some pain or other, then even if I don't know what to say, I'll say, look, I'm really at a loss. I don't know what to say, but I'm thinking of you, and is there anything I can do?
Lovely, yeah.
And there were a lot of people I wish had said something along those lines. They didn't have to have any answers, but them not saying anything just, it just makes you feel like they don't care. Yeah. And so, I knew that a lot of people struggled with it, and I couldn't be around those people, and I couldn't make any effort with those people because I just didn't have the capacity. So, I certainly found out who my really true friends are. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel like there was a lack of vulnerability before that? There was just very surface level relationships?
Some of them, not all of them. I'm not someone who attracts shallow people, to be honest. I'm not very good at small talk. No. I tend to get right down to the the nitty-gritty of everything. Yeah. So a lot of my friends are very vulnerable, authentic people like myself.
Yeah.
And I guess I also was surprised to find that there were a lot of people who I really didn't know that well who reached out to me.
Yeah.
And over the last year and a half, we've become much closer because of what happened.
Yeah.
Because they weren't too scared to be vulnerable, or because they had been through something, maybe not the same sort of thing. Although, can I just say, I was so shocked to find out how many people have lost children. I mean, it's a absolute, it's a tragedy. But I hadn't even thought about it before. I just I don't know. And when it happened,
you just feel like, oh, it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Same with my grandma passing from cancer. I was like, oh, it happens to everyone else. Or like, and then like, it's like hits home and it's like, oh, I'm in a bad dream.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. It's horrible.
If you're just tuning in, on this week's episode of Voices Unhindered, I speak with Sheena Hemens, the former owner of Maison de Crepes. Sheena shares her heart how she grew up in London to Sri Lankan parents that were immigrants, and shares her memories of reading and writing to escape her everyday reality. Sheena goes on to share how she has begun healing from her daughter Lauren's death in 2023, the close of Maison de Crepes, and opens up about being true to herself.
There isn't a hierarchy of what is the worst trauma to the, everybody's trauma and loss is extremely important and valid to them. But I will say that I do think that there is something incredibly unnatural about a mother losing a child. I think when you go through that and you've carried that person inside of you, and I read this beautiful thing, which I don't know if anybody has heard this, but there's a thing called maternal microchimerism, I think it's called, something like that, where basically when you've carried a child, and it doesn't matter if you have actually given birth to that child, even if you've had a miscarriage or a stillbirth or whatever, when you carry a child, the cells from that child, that baby, remain inside the mother for the rest of her life. And I remember reading that, and just after the accident had happened, and I talked about that in my eulogy at the funeral, because it gave me this real comfort to think that there was a part of her that will always reside inside me.
Yeah.
I thought that was really beautiful, and it's given me a lot of comfort over the last sort of 18, 19 months, because she is a part of me, and there's nothing that will ever change that.
Do you mind me asking, is there anything that you kind of wish that you did differently before that happened? Like, not as in like try and prevent the incident, but like as in like the way you lived. Do you kind of wish there was?
Well, I guess anyone would say, well, I wish I'd spent more time with her. I mean, I did a lot of beating myself up about, I'm really good at that. I kind of blame myself and think I should take responsibility for all the things that happened in my life. And I felt really bad, for example, that the last sort of set of text messages that we'd had, the last thing she sent me was "I love you," and all I did was put a heart on it. I didn't say "I love you" back.
And that's just grief. Like, it does that with your brain. Yeah,
I know.
It happened to me as well. I was like, the last thing she said to me was like, I don't know, like you just like overplay stuff.
Oh,
She's like,
absolutely. You think, and I think, God, did she know that I loved her? Well, of course she did. And also there were not a lot of text messages because, I mean, like anyone who's lost someone, you probably go through all your text messages and read them all ad infinitum, and and I did the same. And there were a lot, but they weren't as many as I thought, because I realised that she rang me all the time. She would ring me because she used to walk to work and home every day. And she would call me when she was walking and we would chat. So there's no record of that, and I didn't really have, and I hadn't kept any voicemails. So I realised, how much I missed her voice and missed just hearing her speak and all of those kind of things. But I mean, I don't know. Did I have any regrets, or did I wish that I'd done things differently? I don't think so, because one, I knew, obviously, I mean, she was just hit by a car. It was a completely random accident, which none of us could have done anything about. I don't believe so. But in terms of me personally, I think, like I've said, I wished that I'd had spent more time being in touch with the things that brought me joy, as opposed to, you know, even though I wanted to run the business, the restaurant, for example, and have the business I had before that. But I think I was striving, if I'm really honest, I was striving to prove myself to other people and to, show people that I could do it, that I could be successful. You know, that there was an element of status or something. Maybe status isn't the right word, but I wanted people to know that I was successful. Yeah. Instead of going, what am I getting from this? And how meaningful is it? And what joy am I getting from it? And I know that everybody can't do a job that brings them joy. And, you know, anybody who hears this, who's trudging off to some job that they hate, you know, would just be looking at the radio or wherever at their phone going, what on earth are you talking about? And I totally understand that. But I think you've got, what I've realised is that you have to look for ways to find small pieces of joy in your day. If you're doing a job that you can't change or do, I can't do anything differently, then I think I want to do other things. So that's where the writing and the reading and my paint and things like that, those creative things for me, and it might be sport for someone else, or it might be meditation, or it might be walking, I don't know, but whatever it is that makes you feel happy and at peace, I think we've got to make sure that we don't forget to do those things as well. Sorry, it's very profound, isn't it? I don't
And how do you think you lost those like creative parts of you in the process of you starting your businesses? Obviously, you used to be real into like creativity and like writing, and like how you said, like getting caught up in the humdrum of business. And
well, I think time is a big element. And, you know, I was really committed to both the businesses. I had a marketing and PR business before I owned Maison de Crepes. And I think that making, you know, being the personality type where I wanted to do a really good job, and I wanted to do right by the people that worked for me and the clients that I had. You know, I worked really hard and, you know, poured my life and soul into, as well as my bank balance, into these businesses. But I did forget, you know, I didn't have time to focus on anything that I enjoyed and liked, and actually, you know, when I did have downtime, you know, I was out and drinking probably and socializing, and I'm a really social person. But if there is one regret, I don't know if that's the right word, I think that I did probably go out too much and probably drank too much. But I realize now that it was a distraction as opposed to something that I just did because I enjoyed it. It was something that I did to distract myself from an unhappy life.
It's so interesting because, like, in photos and stuff, you can like pretend you're like all happy, drinking, and in reality, like underneath can be quite different.
Absolutely. And you know, it's always been something that I've been really cognizant of because my father was an alcoholic.
Me too.
Yeah.
But no, he's happy with me saying that. Or my mother too, you know, like.
Yeah. It's a pandemic of its own. You know, I mean.
It's funny because I always thought that, I don't know, I just assumed that like Indian people and Sri Lankans, like they're not really big drinkers.
Oh my God, really? No, I think.
Conservative.
Yeah,
but like,
I think quite the opposite.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, I mean, my mum doesn't drink.
Yeah.
She's been a teetotaler, as far as I know, nearly all her life. But no, my dad was a full-on alcoholic, and he died, as I said, he died when I was 17, and he must have been only about 50, late 50s, early 60s. So he was quite young. So I've always had that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, it can put you off.
Have I got that gene? Have I got that tendency? And, you know, like I said earlier, that you can't expect to be a human being and not have, you can't just pick the parts of your parents that you like. You end up with a whole smorgasbord of
Yes.
genes and traits and things. And it's about then making the choices about.
You still have a choice.
That's right, you do. What do you want to have in your life and in your world? And
it might be harder, but than for someone who hasn't had an alcoholic parent. It might be harder for someone like to stop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. See, I know that alcohol was never an important part of my life when I wasn't out socializing. So I've never drunk at home on my own. In fact, I never drink on my own ever, even now. I think that might be a subconscious throwback to when I was young and I used to see my dad drinking on his own and thinking, God, that's really sad.
Sign, yeah.
That's so sad. I don't want to be like that. So I think maybe subconsciously I just drink tea when I'm at home. Very English. But when I went out, I would socialize and I'd be life and soul and everyone would say I was a party girl and everything. And really, when Lauren died, that all changed because I virtually gave up drinking. And I know a lot of people would turn to drink in a situation like that.
Think so?
But it made me feel so terrible. I still, and maybe it's, that horrible M word, that the menopause, that it does that as well. But alcohol, it's like my body just does not like it anymore. And so, but it made my mental health much worse. So if I drank, and I don't mean get drunk, I mean if I had more than 2 drinks, like wine, I would wake up the next day feeling super sad, really morose. I couldn't control my emotions. I'd be crying. The grief would just come and take me and I couldn't do anything about it. And I just didn't like that. So I just stopped, and I just, occasionally I might have 1 glass of wine with dinner with a friend or something like that. But then that would be it. And I wasn't really going out to parties or because I just couldn't cope with it. It was amazing how much it changed me. But alcohol. So I think it's made my relationship with alcohol very different.
Wow. And that sounds more like a positive than a negative.
Yeah,
to be
honest. Is. Definitely. But it's interesting how other people perceive you when you're not drinking or when you don't drink as much or...
Yeah, how do they? Like, do you mind expanding on that?
Well, I think that, I think people struggle with it. I think that if you aren't drinking, then they maybe feel like it shines a light on their own drinking, although it doesn't. It's got nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Like what I drink.
Especially if they're alcoholics, it's like...
Yeah. Yeah. And so if I wasn't drinking or I wasn't going out, then... And nobody actually said that to my face, but I kind of really got the impression that people just didn't think I was fun anymore. And I've heard this from other people who've tried to stop drinking or reduce their alcohol intake, and people just don't like it. It's like, well, when is the fun person coming back? And it's like...
It's strange because it was the opposite with me with my dad. Like, I like talking to him when he's not drinking. Like, and it's when he's drinking, there's like a wall there and it's like, it's not getting through. Like, you don't feel connected to them. It's...
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? That when you're out, when you go to a bar and you're all together, nobody's talking about deep and meaningfuls. I mean, everybody is getting drunk and talking shallow stupidity stuff, which, yes, that could be fun because there's nothing deep going on. But I guess that after the accident and after all the things that had happened to me, I just couldn't do shallow. It felt really inauthentic. And so, I spent a long time just not engaging with all of that. And then I think I've probably lost some friends over that. But that's okay. I'm okay with that. I don't need to be popular and liked by everybody.
Yeah. And do you feel like you found like more of your identity? Like...
Very much so.
Yeah.
I feel much more at ease and calm in myself now.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm still grieving. It is still,
it's still fresh.
Quite early days in the big grief landscape. I've heard people who've lost children, say that it took them 3, 5, 6 years before they started to feel anything vaguely like they did before. And I think I would say, based on my short experience, I don't think I'll ever be the same that I was before Lauren died. Too much has happened. And the fact that I have another, 2 children and a grandchild to consider, our relationships has changed. The family dynamic relationship has changed. And those things will never, ever revert to what they were. You can't go from being one of a pair of identical twins to being a only daughter without there being some pretty significant changes happening within that family. And then another new normal. After the earthquakes, everyone was talking about the new normal. That's how I feel. This is a new normal for me. Totally, I relate to you. I had a very absent father who, who was emotionally always, he was drunk a lot of the time. And he was a lot of fun because he was drunk, because he wasn't an angry drunk. I was very lucky.
That's good, yeah.
But he, so I have memories of us dancing around the living room, and I probably didn't realize that he was drunk. But he was emotionally unavailable, and he often would be asleep by the time I got home from school because he'd been drinking all day and things like that. And I think that those things definitely affected me as an adult and as I was growing up. And through my 20s especially.
That's really sad. Like, I can relate.
Affected my relationship with men as I moved through my 20s, because I realised that I was a fixer. I was a rescuer. I tried really hard to stop my dad from drinking. So one of the things that I used to do when I was young was he'd hide bottles of whiskey and vodka around the house, and I would find them and I'd tip them down the sink. Yeah, he would get angry, but he was never violent. He just wasn't that sort of person, but he would get angry with me. But I was constantly trying to stop him from having, and then I realized that when he died when I was 17, I went on trying to fix men.
Do you mind me asking, like, what was your mother's role when your dad was like drinking?
Well, I think she was frustrated, but she was equally codependent. Like, I don't, she just kind of put up with it.
Yeah.
But that's, that was, I think that's indicative of their age and their culture. They didn't, divorce was not something that took place or happened. You didn't leave somebody. It was just what you did. You supported and stayed, and no matter what. So, but I can look back now and say, I think that she was probably codependent, but she didn't probably realize that.
What do you mean by codependent? Can you explain?
So she didn't stop him. She just accepted it, and that she, she would buy alcohol for him if he couldn't go out, or because that's, what he wanted when he got quite sick, and so she wouldn't have a boundary and say, if you carry on drinking, I'm going to leave. Yeah. Kind of makes me wonder what I've blocked out, really.
Yeah, because trauma, I've heard, can do that. Like when something traumatic happens, like your brain sometimes just doesn't remember parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not aware of obviously what I've forgotten, but I do know that I don't remember an awful lot. But some of that, I think, I've already said, I lived in a book for nearly all of my childhood years. And I remember the books that I read. I remember, well, no, I don't know whether you said that you wanted to ask me about the restaurant. And I don't.
Yeah, I was trying. The time is gone.
We don't have to.
Maybe another interview next time. Is that okay with you?
Totally.
Sorry to cut you off. Thank you for listening to Voices Unhindered. It's great hearing from my listeners. Reach out with questions and comments through Insta or Facebook. Just search for Voices Unhindered. I'm interested to know what other topics and voices you'd like me to bring on the show. Join me every Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. on Plains FM 96.9. You can find past episodes at plainsfm.org.nz and subscribe to Voices Unhindered on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to never miss an episode.